Spontaneous speaking video 67. What's up, everyone? I'm back today to talk about a concept that I call God's curfew. This has been something, as usual, I've been ruminating about for a while, and I think it was a conversation actually with my good INFJ friend Andrea. Shout out to you. I love you so much. You're so awesome. We literally just go on so many thought trails when we talk, theology, whatever. We actually just got off of one. But the one that we were talking about previously and including today, God's curfew, is how I guess it can kind of be, not even kind of, it can pretty much directly be gleaned off of the Christian creativity video that I posted a couple of weeks ago, where I'm trying to release Christianity, at least the culture of Christianity, from so much of the legalism that's there today. I feel like, kind of like this. I can't say that. Okay, not that I'm Jesus. Definitely not saying that. But I feel like how when Jesus was speaking to the Pharisees and they had all these legalistic rules and this is how you should be doing things and yada yada yada, I I feel like when I make these videos, when I try and speak to other Christians who have these mindsets, they it's funny because they read about the Pharisees all the time, but they may not know. And I think there's like different levels to Pharisees, of course, but they may not know that in freeing themselves, which Christianity is supposed to do, it's supposed to free you. They've placed themselves in shackles once again. And I think once again I've said this in my Christian creativity video, but one of the ways that I feel like they have placed themselves in shackles is in putting so much boundaries in not only the things that they can say, but the things that they can do, things along those lines. And a lot of it goes down to the whole weaker brother, stronger brother concept. So I just want to preface this by saying, listen carefully. Don't take sound bites from this and then be like, oh, so you're saying that we should. No, that's not what I'm saying. And I might have to make like a whole bunch of like disclaimers. I might even have to like comment a few disclaimers. But this is just to help you expand the way that you're thinking, expand your view on Christianity, your relationship with God. Allow yourself to have more intimacy with Him by releasing some of these legalistic fences so that you can have true intimacy and relationship with Him, and then also ultimately true intimacy and relationship with other people. So the reason why I called it God's curfew is the metaphor that Andrea gave me was actually from her pastor. And I love this metaphor. Check it out. So pretty much, imagine that God gave everybody a curfew, 12 a.m. 12 a.m., I want you in the house. By 12 a.m., I want everybody in the house. And, pretty much, yeah, by 12 a.m., I want you guys in the house. Everyone's like, okay, cool. Inevitably, we're always going to have those goody two-shoes types of people, that will be like, oh, well, it's 10:30, it's about to be 12, so I'm going to head home right now. That's fine. Seriously, that's fine. Some people are going to, be coming home earlier. But the problem is, eventually, we start having people come in so much earlier, instead of, coming home, around maybe, 11:30 or 11:45, maybe even, 11:55-ish, maybe even 12 on the dot. They come home so much earlier in fear of that 12 o'clock curfew that they start to even make the new curfew 11 o'clock. And then they pretty much throw their judgment that anybody who is not anybody who's not necessarily coming home by 11 is now a sinner. They're pretty much like a heathen of some sort. They should be like an outcast. Metaphorically speaking, once again, God never said that you have to be home by 11. You did that. You started coming home at 11. That's fine. It's totally fine that you are coming home at 11 o'clock. If you want to come home even at 9, like that's, you can go ahead and do that. But where you cross the line is where you started to judge people or started to like pass judgment on people who are coming in at a later time than you are, thinking that you're better because you're coming in at an earlier time. Nobody is better than the other person. Now, it's different if you're coming in like after 12. And sometimes, maybe we stay out a little bit past 12, either on purpose or, unintentionally. Like things happen, oh God, like I'm sorry, like I got lost and I couldn't find the map back. You're like, whatever, speaking very metaphorically, but I'm going to bring it down to earth in a little bit. But the whole thing is, if you're one of those people, and Paul calls them the weaker brother, that doesn't necessarily mean they're weak. It just means that if you're one of those people that just prefers to come home a lot earlier, like than the actual curfew that's been instilled, go ahead and do that. But try not to impose your personal convictions onto other Christians. That's what I want to say for today. So this curfew can be brought down to a lot of things. One of the things, before we even go there, actually, the whole weaker brother, stronger brother concept comes from Paul. I should have looked that one up. Let me look it up real quick, actually. I believe that it's in 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 8:13. And it's also in Romans 14. In Romans 14:21, this is what it says. It is better not to eat meat or drink wine or to do anything else that will cause your brother or sister to fall. Now, if you read the whole verse, the whole Romans 14, that verse is like, every verse is part of a whole holistic thing. But this is what was going on in that time. This is where the details come in handy. I believe they were Greeks. I believe that they were Greeks. I have to go back and do the research and everything. But the Greeks, let's go with the Greeks for right now. They were sacrificing meat to their gods. They were sacrificing their meat to all these different gods and everything. And pretty much what they would do is that they would go to certain altars and then they would kill the animal and give the flesh off, and leave the animal there as like a sacrifice to God, and their sacrifice to their God, and then they would eat. Then they'd start to offer the hungry Christians some of their meat, like, oh, we just slaughtered this for Zeus. You want some? Now there were Christians who understandably were like, I'm really hungry, but I can't eat that because you just sacrificed it to Zeus, and I don't really worship Zeus. I only worship one God and everything. But then there were other Christians who were genuinely love God. They did not partake in the sacrifices, but they were like, I'm really hungry. Sure, I want to eat some of that meat. And if you go on to read the verse, pretty much this became a problem because the Christians who weren't eating meat, they were like, look at them. I'm over here starving or whatever, but I'm choosing to follow Christ. And look at them. They're just eating away at this meat and everything. And that just became like a problem. They became judgmental towards the Christians who decided to hey, I'm hungry, I'm eating the meat. Once again, those Christians did not partake in the sacrifice. They were just eating the meat after the sacrifice because they were hungry. You're being offered food, what else are you going to do? But I can understand both sides. I can understand why certain Christians decided not to eat the meat, and I can understand why certain Christians decided to, go ahead and eat the meat. So could Paul. And Paul decided to say in Romans 14, he said that if you see people, eating meat and you pretty much believe they shouldn't, you should allow them to eat whatever they want to. And I'll put all the passages that I don't mention in the description below. But yeah, he said that if you or your brother or sister, like if you see them, like, you know, they're eating meat or whatever, let them eat what they want to eat, because even Jesus said it's not what goes into the mouth that defiles the man, but it's what comes out of the mouth. And so it's pretty much like what you say, what you do, like stuff like that. So Paul was giving them permission to like eat whatever, but then he was also saying that if you personally feel convicted about eating this meat, then don't do it. Because then if you do it, if you already feel bad about it and you do it against your own conscience, now you're actually passing the line. Now you're actually sinning. So if we're bringing it back to that curfew, that metaphor curfew, that metaphor curfew, then if you believe now that even though God did not say that the curfew was 11 p.m., but instead he said it was 12 a.m., if you now all of a sudden have done this so much where now it's like ingrained into you and you literally feel bad that you're staying out past 11, be home by 11. Make that your next curfew. However, keep in mind that not everybody has that same personal conviction as you do. The actual time was 12. And so that's what it's got to be. Like that's where the line is drawn. And even then, you're still not really supposed to like judge in the sense where it's like, oh, that person's going to hell. You can remind the person like, hey man, I've noticed that you've been coming home late. Do you need help with something? You know, stuff like that. But don't be like, wow, you're horrible. You shouldn't. You're not even one of God's children. How are you even part of this family? You keep on coming in at 12:30, 2 a.m., stuff like that. Like that's not how it's supposed to be. So the way today we don't deal with meat. Today we deal with different types of things, and one of them is music. Music is one of those things where, like I said in the creativity video, you guys should definitely go see it. It was a great discussion that I had with Alex and Angelica. It was awesome. But in the creativity video, what I said is that, and Angelica said it too, a lot of people, a lot of Christians, we have those who are like, that guy isn't really making music specifically for Christ. He didn't really say Jesus like 30 times in it. I don't know. I don't think that I should really like listen to this. That's fine, man. You do you. That's totally okay. You want to be home by 10:30? Fine. You want to be home by 11 o'clock? Fine. I'm not pressing you about it. In fact, I would actually feel bad to press you about it. In fact, the verse that I just read off where Paul said that it'd be best not to eat that meat or whatever, we're getting there. We're still unpacking. I'm trying to unpack this the best I can. But, yeah, I'll just unpack this first. So, continuing with the music thing, there's some people who don't want to listen to certain types of music because it's not explicitly labeled Christian. It's not explicitly, like glorifying God. Explicitly glorifying God. However, the people who decide to listen to music that's not really doing that, that still love God and everything, yes, there are such people. I'm actually one of them. We should not judge them. If you guys know that I listen to J. Cole and Kendrick Lamar and, even Eminem, that does not make me less of a Christian. That does not make me someone who now God looks down upon and frowns upon. That does not make me someone who's like now coming in after a certain curfew. The reasons why I personally like those types of music is that as a poet, even as a low-key, like as a rapper and everything, I just enjoy words. I enjoy wordplay and all of that. And to be honest, rap is not confined to Christianity, and I think that we put limits, we put so many limits and fences around certain things that like now when you have like a really, really, really great rapper, but they can only rap about this set of things, like, oh, you remember you have to put Jesus 20 times in your song and all of that, you're limiting how good the rapper can be, and then how much influence that rapper can make. If that rapper wants to continue to have that type of life, that's fine. You can continue to entertain the Christians. You can continue to do that. But me, I listen to these things and I'm inspired by them. Just like Man in the Mirror by Michael Jackson. It's not entirely talking about, like anything like explicitly Christ related. But the message in the song is, hey, in order for me to make a change in the world, I have to make a change within myself. So therefore, that's a message that I think that, like, like, it's truthful and that God loves it, like, and as a Christian, I will take that, and because out of the abundance of my heart, which is filled with God, the mouth flows. Anything that comes through this filter and like comes back out, it's gonna be Christ related. Whether it's psychology, whether it's certain music, like whatever, it's gonna be coming back out in a Christian worldview. Not in like a religious worldview, not in like a very churchy way, but in a Christian worldview, because I look at the world through the eyes of how I believe Christ should have it. But if like, we should not judge those who are listening to certain types of music. And in the same sense, just like what Paul was saying in that verse, if you're around people, this is for the Christians who are like me, the stronger brothers, as you'd say. If you're around people who cannot really take certain types of music because they like to be home at like 11, pretty much don't force people to stay out late with you. Like in this video, I'm not encouraging any of you guys who come home at 11 p.m. to start staying out past 11 p.m. In fact, I would actually even discourage you guys from doing that sometimes if that's the case. But what I'm saying is that there are benefits to staying out past 11 p.m. sometimes. And if you don't want to, that's fine. But there's also, we should not judge those who stay out past 11 p.m., but we also should not judge those who come in at 11 p.m. So bringing this to earth, we should not judge those who only listen to Christian music. My mom, she loves to listen to all 5 songs they play on K-Love over and over and over again. And it's like, hey, I laugh at her, but if that's what you like, then that's what you like. But if she were to try and impose me to only listen to that, that's where there's a problem. If I were to try and impose to her, like, you have to listen to, like, other things, that's where there's a problem. So with what Paul was saying is, if you were around people who didn't want to eat that meat, then we should avoid eating our meat in front of them. If you have a friend who does not really like listening to secular music because they feel like, it's just not good for their spirit and everything, which would be an example of somebody coming home at 11 p.m., then you should not play that type of music in the car while they're in the car. You should not, like, send them that type of song. You should not pretty much, like, tempt them. You should restrain from, like, if you usually listen to that type of music, try and get more on their level. Try to pretty much, like, when you're around the weaker brothers, try and get on their level and operate with them, so that you do not cause them to stumble and fall off of their own personal convictions. That's what's being said. But once again, do not, like, it goes both ways. Do not judge those who are coming in at 12 on the dot or a little bit before, and do not judge those who are coming in way before 12 o'clock a.m. So yeah, music. And I think you guys are pretty much getting the concept of it. Another one is drinking. Now, the Bible, to be honest, technically says that the sin is in getting drunk, not necessarily like drinking the alcohol. Now, it should also be said that, like, Christians should know that back then, the alcohol that was used at the time was a lot weaker than it is now. But pretty much, yeah, like I'm saying, like, we should not judge those who drink alcohol because if we're going with the curfew metaphor, it's the people who pretty much drink it to get drunk and actually do get drunk. Those are the ones who are now coming home at around 12, like past 12 a.m. That's where you've crossed that line. You've crossed that curfew. But those who just drink alcohol, like some wine or something, like maybe at like a party or get together, whatever the case may be, but they drink responsibly, we should not judge them. There's no problem if you don't want to eat that meat, if you don't want to drink the alcohol, that's fine. But don't pass judgment on those people either, because they're still within that 11 to 12 range. They have not really crossed that line yet. So that's another thing. Another thing is, just like we were saying, like with music, for the people who may judge, like, oh, so you listen to secular music? Yeah, what? Do you only watch movies like God is Not Dead? Like, there's secular movies and then there's like Christian movies, and let's be honest, Christian movies are not the best. And we talk about this in the Christian creativity thing because they put so many parameters like around it. Now, I think that maybe we're possibly like getting better. Like, for example, I loved The Shack, and I heard that I Can Only Imagine was actually really good. I want to see that, and I do like the Bible story. Like, I think that we're getting a little bit more creative with a lot of things, thankfully. But we should not judge those who decide to like go beyond that. Now, if they're like watching like some really, really crazy stuff, still don't judge them, but it's like, okay, well, I guess like that's different. Just like if you're listening to like, booty, 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 rocket, like that's different, that's a different type of music, whatever, like, hey, but you should just know where to keep a judgment, where not to. Tattoos, that's another thing. There's some people who, and tattoos and earrings, we'll just group those two together. There's a lot of people who pretty much stick in that Christian bubble, and because there's so much in that subculture, they literally cannot relate to the people in the world, like, at all. And how do you expect to influence people that can't even relate to you? You're trying to bring people over to Christ. You're trying to introduce them to how awesome Jesus is, but they don't even know you well enough or like you well enough to even want to have respect for your best friend Jesus. But there are those who also, like, they wear tattoos, for example, and they're happy, like they're clearly they're evidently Christian. So like my 116 chain, it stands for Romans 1:16. For I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it's the power of Christ. And it's actually based off of the 116 Click, the one that Lecrae's in with Andy Mineo, Tripoli, KB, stuff like that. They all have like the tattoos like over here, and just like how people ask me like, oh, what does this mean and everything, and then it gives me the opportunity to like flip it over and then explain to them. Said that like, a lot of people are probably like, oh, great, there's a cross, here we go. But I explained to them in a way where they could be able to relate to it. In the same way, Lecrae and them, they'll have the tattoo, and that's opened a lot of doors for them to be able to evangelize. And just like Alex said in our past video, if this is something that God is using, how can I judge it? Pretty much. I think that was the quote. Like, pretty much, like, if God is using this and it's working, then why should I frown upon it? How can I judge this method? And so some people, they literally, they were already having tattoos, they were already having like earrings and stuff, and they choose not to get rid of them because now it's like, hey, if you look like the world, we're supposed to be in the world but not of it. And they're not being of the world because inside them they are still on that mission, even if they may look like the world. So now it's kind of like we're playing that whole game. Like, if the wolves can come in sheep clothing, well, now we are sheep going in like maybe even like wolf clothing. I don't know, and we're bringing people, like we're drawing people like closer in a way. But yeah, I hope you guys are like getting the point. Anyway, all that to say, like, we have to get out of our Christian bubble, and we should also like understand how we should like take off a lot of the parameters, the legalistic parameters that we have on so many things, because it's killing us. Let me give you a big example just to like wrap this up. I'm going to be reading Ezekiel chapter 23. You guys should probably read the whole chapter, but I'm only going to read from 11 to 20. 1. Now her sister Oholibah saw this, but she was even more depraved in her lust than Ohola, that was her sister, and made her promiscuous acts worse than those of her sister. She lusted after the Assyrians. Governors and prefects, warriors, splendidly dressed, horsemen riding on steeds, all of them desirable young men. And I saw that she had defiled herself. Both of them had taken the same path. But she increased her promiscuity when she saw male figures carved on the wall. Keep on losing my spot. Images of the Chaldeans engraved in bright red, wearing belts on their waists and flowing turbans on their heads. All of them looked like officers, a depiction of the Babylonians in Chaldea, their native land. At the sight of them, she lusted after them and sent messengers to them in Chaldea. Then the Babylonians came to her bed, the bed of love, and defiled her with their lust. But after she was defiled by them, she turned away from them in disgust. When she flaunted her promiscuity and exposed her nakedness, I turned away from her in disgust, just as I turned away from her sister. Yet she multiplied her acts of promiscuity, remembering the days of her youth when she acted like a prostitute in the land of Egypt, and lusted after their lovers whose sexual members, which is another word for penises. Are you guys okay? I said this is going to be explicit in the title, but yes, sexual members, and in some translations it does say penis, that's why I said it, were like those of donkeys. Y'all know how big a donkey penis is? Those of donkeys, and whose emission was like that of stallions. We all know what that means, right? If you don't, maybe not look it up, depending on if you're an 11 o'clock type of person or a 12 o'clock type of person. But donkey/stallion emissions are pretty heavy. It's like a water hose. Anyway, so you revisited the depravity of your youth when the Egyptians caressed your nipples to enjoy your youthful breasts. If you think that's bad, read Songs of Solomon. Denzel, why did you just read that porn to me? First of all, once again, it's the Bible. Literally the holy book, the holiest book that there is. You can go read it yourself, and depending on the translation, it's even more explicit. That was actually pretty safe. Like I said, the first time I actually read that passage, I forgot what, I think maybe it was King James Version. I don't remember. But it literally said like, whose genitals were the size of donkeys, and another one said like whose penises were the size of donkeys, and like it's that type of stuff. So once again, why would I read that? The reason why I read it is because if the Bible, the holy book, can get this explicit to make a point, why do we restrain ourselves sometimes? Now, I understand why sometimes we do it. I understand sometimes, like, oh, well, there's some kids are like, they're just way too young to, like, be knowing about all this stuff. But at the same time, where do we draw that line? Because sometimes, like, there won't even be, like, really, like, kids around, but it's like, oh, don't say the word sex. Oh, that's taboo. Don't talk about, like, we make up all of these euphemisms for certain words, like, oh, well, my poom poom, or I don't know, stuff like that. And it's like, just say what it is. Just say what it is. Masturbation, ejaculation, pornography, oral sex, nipples, like whatever that is. And I know, like, I'm probably like it's like scratching a chalkboard for some of y'all, some of the 11 p.m. type of people, maybe even like the 9 o'clock people actually tuned out a long time ago. They saw explicit in the title and decided not to watch. But yeah, this is like scratching a chalkboard for some of you, and I'm not trying to like be like super controversial, but I'm literally trying to make a point that like the Bible itself literally has these words, and I think that it's helpful to have such explicit descriptions and stuff at times, especially when we're counseling like certain people. I knew of well, let me say this now. Be explicit sometimes, because honestly, people at school and in the world will be. Yeah. I knew of this girl. I'm not going to say her name, but this girl at my school, my freshman year, we had these positions called prayer leader, which is pretty much like a Bible study leader on the hall. And you pretty much have like people on your hall, like they come to your room, you guys all hold a Bible study together, and you're supposed to like lead it. I was a prayer leader for I think a school year before I moved off campus. But I know this girl who was so innocent minded that like she literally like barely knew about sex, because she did not know what ejaculation was. And another girl came and told us that apparently because that girl, like the girl in her crap. How am I gonna say this without using names? Um, let's just say that the first girl's name was Sarah, and the second girl's name was like Abby. Um, Sarah is the one who is pretty much like oblivious to like sex and other explicit types of things, as a freshman in college. And Abby comes to Sarah, and Abby has been through certain things, and she comes to Sarah and she tries to like talk to her about certain things, like, hey, so I've been struggling with masturbation, I've been struggling like with whatever, and Sarah's like, excuse me, what? Like she doesn't know what it is. It doesn't compute because she's been so shielded off. She's been so guarded that now her ability to even help other people is now limited. Literally, it's like a whole Finding Nemo and Marlin type of situation where it's like I tried to protect you so heavily, or even better, watch Archangel from Black Mirror on Netflix. That's what we call a helicopter mom, and it's a slippery slope type of episode, but you pretty much will get the concept of it, of what happens when you really restrain certain people so heavily. Now, in Sarah's case, she did not become rebellious, at least not from what I've seen, but there's so many other cases where the people do become rebellious because they're so heavily guarded off. They're so protected that once they're exposed to even a little bit, then they just go off. You need to be exposed to some certain things. So you need to start telling your children about sex. You know, like you need to let them know. Now, you're not going to be telling a 4-year-old that type of stuff. But at a certain age, there's an age before they become a teenager where you should start introducing this to them. You, as the parent, need to teach them explicitly, like, hey, this is what it is. It's beautiful, but it needs to be done in marriage, you know, and this is why. Explain why it needs to be done in marriage, stuff like that. If you don't understand all the reasons why, you can check out my Misconceptions on Christianity Part 2 video, where I go really in depth with this, why sex should be done in marriage and everything. But it's really important to explain all of that, because if you don't do it, number one, they could end up like Sarah, where like now they are limited in how they're able to help other people. But then number two, they might rebel because the people at school will then tell them. I didn't know anything, for example, and that this has gone like 30 something minutes. So I've kind of like pushed all this stuff to the end because I know that a lot of people, like, they might not be able to like watch all the way through. But this is like where like it gets like a little bit more personal. I know, for example, like, I did not even know that masturbation was a thing until 7th, 8th grade. And a lot of my friends were like, what? Like, how did you know? Literally, I was introduced to it by people at school. My father never talked to me about that. Mother clearly never talked to me about that. Nobody talked to me about stuff like that. Never even like thought about it. But people at school, they were like talking about porn. I didn't know what porn was. I didn't know what porn was in 7th, 8th grade until them. They introduced me to it. They were like talking about it. They're the cool kids, and I'm trying to hang out. I asked them like, hey, what's pornography? Or like, hey, what's masturbation? What's jacking off? You know, all of this stuff. And they're like, oh, you mean you never busted a nut before? I'm like, what the heck is that? You know, and they literally wrote down a whole bunch of websites for me, and they instructed me on how to masturbate. These are people at school in 7th, 8th grade. They're teaching me how to do this, and I went home and I did it. First time, it's like, oh, you know, like, wow, that felt good, but I don't know, I felt kind of weird. And the next thing you know, like, couple weeks, couple days later, I don't know, like, and then you all of a sudden start like getting like more into it or whatever. How different would things have been if this isn't to blame my parents, but if I had known about this in advance and I knew about like how it could affect me, um, and why it's probably not always like the best thing to do, if ever. You know that there's things like nocturnal emissions where like it handles that for you and all that. There's a whole other story, but yeah, how do we how different could that stuff have been? How different could we have been if we were taught by the church and by our parents what sex was, why sex was bad, things like that, rather than learning about it from music and the people at school. And then when we go off and do wrong, then the church wants to like get upset, but they failed on like actually like breaking it down to us and explaining what it was because it's too taboo of a subject. We need to stop with all the touchy subjects. Get it, touchy subject? Yeah, I actually stole that from Ezekiel's own. You should go check out his video, by the way. It's on masturbation. It's a really good video where he's like, it's a really good spoken word poem. He's a Christian poet. But anyway, wow, this has been probably the longest spontaneous speaking video ever, but keep on going. I'm wrapping it up. All of this to say, and I wanted to touch on the TD Jakes and Stephen Furtick creativity video, comfort zone and capacity, but I will just put this little blurb up there. But all of this to say that I want everyone to understand the benefits of explicity. I want everyone to understand that coming home a little bit before curfew or right on the dot of curfew does not make you a horrible Christian. And just because you come home a couple hours before curfew or way before curfew, or maybe you never even leave the house, that doesn't make you a better Christian either. Let's stop trying to judge each other and let's continue to get along. Let's stop the prayer and pettiness, and let's be a family. So yes, that is my rant for today. For those of you who were able to make it all this way, God bless you. For those of you who are probably like looking at me like, oh, Denzel, I can't believe it. I'm sorry. I feel like me introducing this now, not that my channel is going to become like way worse or anything like that, but it's going to, this is like a preface so that like now when people like really need help with like more explicit things, like if I have like a live stream, which I'm planning to like eventually, then I won't be so caught off guard. Like I'm preparing for, people to be like, for me to be vulnerable with people, and it's that vulnerability, it's my testimony that's going to help people get saved, that's going to actually impact people, how real I am with them. And if you can't really handle that, then I apologize, and I understand. You can go home at 11, but out here we stay out late. So we don't go past curfew though, but we stay out late. So yeah, thanks again for watching. Love you all, and done.